right, so it seems everyone's in, so we'll get started. First off, okay, let's get started. So first off, welcome back to Microsoft. We really enjoy doing these series. We took a little time off over the good to be back and have you guys. I see a lot of familiar faces from previous ones. If you remember sort of the couple other times I was up here, I was talking about how a lot of what we're seeing in the big data space was really around enterprises pushing out and putting tools in end users' hands. In our world, that's SharePoint, it's Excel, and they've learned, we're still doing a lot of that. But what we're seeing a lot now, we're seeing both in our enterprise space as well as in some of the more scientific and open source side too, is movement around security and governance. So you see wire encryption coming from Hortonworks, and we really see people really trying to do a lot of making sure that now that they've democratized these big data resources, how they make sure that it's governed appropriately. And so what my team does, I run the Microsoft Technology Center, which is largely based across the hall. So if anybody wants to swing over afterwards, happy to walk you through. We've got some demo rooms. We've got a couple stories at Data Center. We're happy to show you how we do some of the scenarios there. But what we see a lot of is people coming in and talking about, hey, they've got this project that they're running, they've got a set of scenarios they've built, and now they want to push that out. And oh my God, there's sensitive data in there. How do they govern that? And so one of the things that we've been partnering with is with Dell. They have what they call a quick start data warehouse, and what it allows us to do is take those unstructured data stores, suck out the really interesting information, put that in a appliance level data warehouse, and really get business value out of that very quickly. So they go from everything from a couple U's, and Steve will tell you more about in just a second, all the way up to the parallel data warehouse, which is our rack size, parallelized sort of scale-up SQL Server. So we can show you that. We can show you the stuff that Dell has, and we'd love to be able to sort of engage and talk about how we can sort of take on those larger scenarios. So Microsoft's data story really takes everything from sort of how do we manage that data, how do we analyze it, and also how do we present it out to the end user. We've got huge investments in the Bing world and machine intelligence that we're bringing into our data management products. So we're happy to talk about any of those. One other thing, just to keep on time, is sort of the next round of this series is coming up on, let me look at the date, November 7th, so it's about 3 weeks out. Agenda, we've got a great panel that Jamil is standing in there in the back, so you can grab Jamil and talk more about that. He's really the brains behind this series from the Microsoft standpoint, so he deserves all the credit for pulling this together. But if you go to aka.ms, DB Analytics, Big Data, Big BD, sorry, Analytics, you can get sort of the registration. It's almost full. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the list, and then we're going to take people on first come, first served basis on once we get full. So if you're interested, do sign up for that. And with that, I'll pass it off to Steve. And thank you, and once again, welcome. We appreciate your time.
I don't know if I'm loud enough. Can you hear me out there? Yeah. Oh, great, that I can talk loud and I don't have to use a mic either. And thanks, Scott, for inviting me here. And we're one of the sponsors of these events, some of these events, these big data events. And we thought getting together made a lot of sense because we have a lot of the hardware. People know us as a hardware company. We're also becoming a software company. And one of our practice areas is big data, business intelligence, and data warehousing. So if you think of Dell as a hardware company, it makes sense that we're building data warehouses, but we've also acquired a lot of software with the acquisition of Quest. We formed a very large software company, and we are focusing on specific areas where we see needs in the industry to be able to build solutions. One of the big ones we see is big data, business intelligence, and data analytics. So I'm going to just quickly go through something we're doing at Dell. As Scott indicated, we have various size data warehouses based on SQL. And this event, obviously, we're partnering with Microsoft on the SQL Server side of data warehousing. And we are having a lot of experience, a lot of good positive experience with customers working jointly together with Microsoft and Microsoft partners. And we start out at the quick start, which he referenced, starts around 5 terabytes. And then we go all the way up to a 6 petabyte parallel data warehouse. We have a middle appliance, and I'll just jump through those really quickly. So what we learned is people were taking a lot of time designing EDWs, enterprise data warehouses, and they were taking a lot of time architecting these solutions when we use them internally, and we decided to productize what we use and then bring that out to our customers. So we found that people like buying an appliance because it gets loaded in there, it's to use, it's ready to go. We provide the services, we provide all the software required to make it work, and then build out your BI solution. And I'm not going to get much into the software, but we also have solutions that help with the integration. Like we have Polybase on the Microsoft side to integrate the unstructured data, Hadoop data, into a parallel data warehouse or a quick start or any other data warehouse based on SQL Server. We have another tool that allows you to search through unstructured data in a Google-like search tool or a Bing-like search tool. Sorry, used the wrong company. So use a search engine where you can search through and extract information using ontology or machine language type language to be able to look for those associations of data in that unstructured data, put up a heat map and some other visualizations to be able to quickly go through that and then extract what you need for your reporting and for your visualizations. So it's called Katenga. It's a recent acquisition that came over with Quest. And we're also building BI suites that are based on Microsoft SQL Server, SharePoint, and even Dynamics from the CRM perspective. So we have a really strong practice around there. There's a few other tools mentioned in here, but I'm not going to go into those now. We have a second appliance, which is a standalone server. It's Whisper Quiet Fan. It's a 4-blade server. We call it a data center, a mini data center. And this Vertex system also can be a 5U rack-mounted unit. You just turn it sideways. The beauty of this is you can build a whole BI solution off of these 4 blades. It has up to 3 terabytes of data, RAM, and very high capacity on the hard disk. It comes standard with 48 terabytes of user data. However, it can have attached storage to it also. So it's a pretty cool little box for that mid-market space for remote offices. And then we go up to and it's all again based on the SQL Server Fast Track Reference Architecture. And then you have the parallel data warehouse. And that's the big boy. That's the massive parallel processing data warehouse. This screens, we are winning lots of really big projects compared to some of the other NoSQL Server, not only SQL Server solutions out there on the market. The reason it's really nice is you don't have to reinvest in your existing investment with Microsoft SQL Server and SharePoint and other Microsoft solutions. You already have people internally in your organizations typically that are DBAs around SQL, or they're experts at SharePoint. And why reinvent the wheel when you already have something that's really powerful? So that's the big value prop, is if you use SQL, if you use Microsoft solutions, you're not having to reinvest in a lot of other solutions. And most of the time, almost without exception, Microsoft's a lower cost solution. So that's why we are so excited about working with Microsoft. The other thing is, it's really on the big data and the big data warehouse side, it's the lowest cost per terabyte of anything out there on the market. So I really encourage you looking at it. We're getting huge performance improvements over other solutions on the market. And it's already engineered and ready to go, just plug it in. And again, Dell services and Microsoft services and our partners can support these. The only thing I wanted to show is, one of the reasons why our approach works so well is we're using what we call a hub and spoke architecture. So when Scott was talking about security, we just did a project with a Big 4 accounting company accounting firm over in EMEA, and their biggest challenge was the digital data export restriction laws. So they wanted a bunch of smaller appliances in all the different countries around Germany so that they would make sure they're not going out of compliance with data being taken or exported out of Germany or out of the other countries, because if they do that, they get a big fine. And so this one organization had a huge fine slapped on them because of these export restriction laws. And so they put all these little quick starts out around Europe, and then they had 2 parallel data warehouses internally in Germany, and that was a hub and spoke architecture. But it really works for loading zones, for landing zones, and for staging areas, for test dev. Those little appliances will save you a lot of money and give you really high performance. So consider a hub and spoke topology when you're architecting a big data or a BI environment. That's pretty much it for me. I do have but I just want to point out that sizing is really important. When you're starting to design your data warehouse environment, really think about sizing the data. That's where we can help you and make sure you're really optimizing your dollars. So I have a really dumb joke. And it's really dumb. So So what did the big data warehouse say to the small data warehouse? Huh? What?
I'm big.
You're big. No, this is what he said. He said, you know what they say, sizing does matter. Okay, with that, I'll turn it over to the smart people. Here's Robbie from the Hive.
So I'd like to introduce a partner of ours, O'Reilly folks, and this is Kathy from O'Reilly. They are about to have a conference in a couple of weeks.
That's right,
Strata New York,
World,
which is
right.
really the Hadoop conference, and so we're extremely pleased to be partnering with the O'Reilly folks. So what we're going to do here is maybe you can put these here.
Okay.
I'll let you do the drawing.
Okay.
We have some books to give away,
That's right.
and so go for it, Kathy.
All right. Good luck to everyone who entered. Thanks to Rowdy and the Hive for inviting us. It's always fun. Let's see. First, so I have 5 books here, as you guys saw. 5 are newest releases. The first winner for graph databases is
Vijay Rao.
Vijay Rao.
Vijay
Is
Subbarao.
Vijay here? All right.
Which is this was mine. I asked you to get it.
Okay, the second, Ellen Friedman.
Oh wow, she's lucky.
Is Ellen Friedman here? She
I went one time last time also.
She didn't even would you like Hadoop operations again or interactive? But she
No,
went,
she's ready.
all right.
And she's lucky. See, she's a committed Hive follower. She got the prize last time also.
She did get the prize. So I'll try to distribute this more evenly. Robert Sloan. Robert.
Yay.
Robert. One of these is actually what you picked. There's the Hadoop operation. Okay.
Cool.
Interactive data visualization. Okay. All right, 2 more. Chances are pretty good, actually. Alexander Campbell. Alex.
All right.
All right. We have the MongoDB and
Hadoop operation.
Hadoop operations. The last one for Mongo, which was actually the policy they wanted. William Liu. Oh.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So first I want to do an introduction. So we have, many of you know Pashu, and Pashu is on maternity leave. So for the next few months we have a young lady here, Vibha, do you want to stand up? Who you'll be receiving messages from. Good. And so we'll kind of, we have a big agenda today, so we'll get going rapidly. All of you know the Hive think tank, that's why you're here. We are helping lead the conversation around big data, at least here in Silicon Valley. Today, the event is being streamed all over the world. We recently had events in India along with Microsoft, in Tokyo along with Microsoft and some other vendors. And so we have over 3,500 people who are physically being to these events. And so we're extraordinarily pleased with how well these events are going. The next event, the date is not locked down yet. It's either Tuesday or Thursday. It's a very special event. There's an artist visiting from Spain who is currently a resident at the Villa Montalvo. And so he is in the process of putting together an exhibit inspired by big data. So he'll talk both about his past work, and he has big exhibits in public spaces, in airports, and of course in different galleries. And joining him, I don't know if Chris is here. Is Chris here today? Chris was supposed to come, then come. So joining him will be Chris, who has made a movie on big data. He's going to show you a small 10-minute clip of the movie. So we will keep, watch our meetup page or our website, and we'll keep you posted. This is going to be a very exciting event. Our partners, Sandhill Group, are coming out with a report that is called Big Data Prescriptions for Transforming Business. So they're doing a whole variety of things. They're talking to a lot of different CMOs, CIOs, C-level, VP-level executives from different business functions. They are surveying a number of different people. So here what they want to do is get people who have Hadoop experience to participate in the survey. And there's a bunch of good things that you get for participating. So we would really appreciate, and you can go to our website and there's a link if you can participate in the survey. That's Sandhill Group. We are very thankful to Dell and Microsoft, who are our partners at this event and have sponsored the Hive think tank. Also thanks to Juniper, Wilson Sonsini, Perkins Coie, and a number of other in-kind partners, including the O'Reilly folks that we mentioned. A brief introduction to what the Hive is. So we incubate, fund, and launch companies in the big data space. The specific slice of the big data market that we focus on, our companies focus on, are applications that are driven by data. So you won't find us invest in companies that are infrastructure companies. We are different from traditional VCs. We are very active with our companies. So in addition to funding, Lance, do you want to stand up? Lance, our CTO, is actively engaged with people, helping them develop their big data component. In addition to that, we help them with go-to-market, introduce them to partners, clients, and so forth. So it's a high-touch model, very focused around big data. And you'll see that the companies we help build are either functional applications or vertical applications. Our point of view is the next big thing in applications after web and social and mobile is data-driven applications. So it's going to, in our opinion, create unprecedented opportunities and dramatic increases in productivity. So with that, I'd like to now get our panelists on board, going to come and sit down. We have an incredible set of panelists today. Unlike our typical events, we don't have vendors or sort of general pontificators. We have people who are in the trenches, who are helping implement solutions. So the topic today is around big data use cases in the high-tech industry. And so just some kind of ground rules. I would say refrain from kind of asking questions about specific kind of vendor solutions. We'll talk about categories of solutions. And so, and also kind of, we want to refrain from kind of asking the panelists about specific details of what they're doing within their company, which is typically proprietary. So with that, and we'll intersperse. So we'll have a conversation. I'll kind of try to lead with a few questions whenever we get stuck, and then we'll open it out to the audience for questions. Scott and Ellen are helping us with microphones for the audience. So maybe starting from that side, Shashi, you could just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background in the space, and maybe if you have some high-level thoughts, views that you want to share with the audience just on the space.
So, good evening, everyone. I'm Shashi Kiran. I'm a manager BI in Cisco, managing different functions from supply chain, marketing. The current role is I'm doing more of a business engagement side, but prior to that, I have done a lot of BI execution and BI delivery. I managed this, along with the BIs, space. We are also interacting with the big data initiatives. We have a map and all solutions from our system in Cisco. So yeah, apart from that, we can talk about different BI trend challenges and whatever questions you have.
Hello everybody, I'm Senthil Thangavelu, data enthusiast is the way I like to call myself. Data of all types, big, small, and everything in between. Specifically, there are a couple of areas that seem to be interesting for me of late. One of them is really the interconnectedness of data. By that I mean, seemingly unconnected occurrences that happen in some part of the world that has an impact on your business, right? Actually, if you actually take it down one level below, the data level, they may not be connection points, if you will, but these events are really very subtle leading indicators that if you're able to harness, then you get insights and you're highly competitive. So that's one area. The other area, if you talk about big data, it's all about, well, not all, but mostly about finding the proverbial needle in a haystack, right? So the area that seems to be of interest to me of late is defining that haystack, right? I mean, what is the right haystack? What is the optimal haystack? I mean, how wide does it have to be? How big does it have to be? There are opportunities to really lean it out so you still get to the same quality of insight, but probably a lot more quicker. So those are areas of interest for me. If you really look at big data and high tech, I think high tech is a very wide category. Right? There are different definitions of what high tech is. I think by and large we can agree that semiconductor, electronic manufacturing services, wearable devices, wearable computing, ISVs, independent software vendors. So I think there is a lot of parallels between big data and high tech, or there are a lot of overlaps and relationships. Let me explain that. I think everybody understands the 3 V's of big data, right? The volume, velocity, and variety. So if you look at the sector that I just talked about, obviously there is a global customer base, right? Whether you're selling software or you're selling wearable computing or what have you. So that lends itself to the volume part of big data. Then the categories, because of the global customers, right? So the categories of products that fall within the space lends itself to the variety of that part of the V, right? The big data. Then the speed with which you have to go to market, whether it's a new product or revving up your existing products, right? Whether they're the software versions, whether the software versions, or whether it's a computable device or handheld or what have you, you are constantly releasing new versions of this. So that contributes to the velocity. So I think the characteristics of big data are also intrinsic in the sector. That's my viewpoint. But I'm also interested to hear what my other panelists say. Happy to be here. I hope to have some fun.
Hi, my name is Ram Madrash. I am from Aruba Networks. I'm a director of business intelligence, data and master data within the company. I take care of all the functional information needs within the company across all business functions. I come with 2 perspectives. I mean, within the company, Aruba Networks, I don't have a use for big data. We are a mid-sized company. We are upwards of $650 million in revenue. Within our company, we don't have a use for big data from our data needs. But where I see big data playing a big role is in customers of ours. As a company, we sell wireless LAN solutions, basically mobility controllers and wireless access points. And the deployment of the products that we sell to our customers have obviously got some usage of big data as they implement our products. So I'll touch on that as we get deeper into the conversation with Ravi. So I also have, during the session, my perceptions. I spent 7 years at Cisco, a large high-tech company, and after that I moved to Aruba Networks, a mid-sized company. So some of my perspectives in terms of BI projects implementations, programs of BI, how it gets implemented, comparing a large implementation that happens in big companies compared to smaller companies, how it's approached. Some perspectives that I have based on my experience with a larger company and moving to a mid-sized company.
Thanks. My name is Michael Green. I am the head of Customer 360 and data visualization at Symantec. Primarily responsible for how we look and thread and tie together our view of a customer around the entire customer lifecycle. So a lot of that is both pulling in structured and unstructured data and trying to make a sense of a lot of the 3 Ds, how we join them up and how we get this notion of what are the highest opportunities we have with our customers, as well as how do we understand the patterns and the behaviors and be able to act on it and understand and build for the future in really what the customer's needs are. So we got everything from consumer products, and maybe I should have brought some Norton copies to hand out for free or something, and some Riley books. So we've got both consumers, our commercial kind of mid-market space, and enterprise customers, all with different types of challenges around security. So obviously we look at big data as things, how do we do pattern recognition and understand threat detection, all the way to the amount of data that we collect from the client applications that we have there to understand the actual usage, what are the features and functions that people are using, and more importantly, how do we take that data and really understand both the trends and the kind of capabilities that we can build out to better serve our customers.
So for the purpose of today's discussion, what I thought we could do is kind of frame it into sections. So if we can keep the questions from the audience within these sections. So we'll first start talking about use cases and for sort of BI and big data. And following that, we'll talk about kind of analytics and various kinds of analytic approaches. We'll then sort of shift to data management. Talk about sort of what makes data projects successful. Maybe touch upon some technology trends. And if we haven't covered all the topics you wanted, there will be time for additional questions.
It's on your chair.
Thank you. So just since I heard you say that we are not big data, so just for the purpose of today's discussion, I'll just kind of broaden what we mean by big data here, which is any use of data. So single source unstructured data, combination of unstructured structured data, log data, machine data, combining first party, third party, public, social data, applying any math. You don't have to go on the deep end to go to machine learning, any math to data, any and all of that for us, for this conversation is big data. And I know the argument like, oh yes, we've had big data for a long time. Yes, we agree with that. So you talked about sort of your role, Michael, and so maybe we just start with you. So what do you see as the opportunities around customer analytics and sort of potential sort of benefits in sales and marketing?
So one of the most interesting things is looking at the actual pattern behaviors that people interact with your website when they're particularly unknown. So what do you want to try and learn to better inform the way that you would do outreach or marketing or pre-sales? So what are they saying versus what they're actually doing? Understanding what particular offers that are resonating, doing A/B offer optimization, taking that information and blending it back in with your outbound and being able to get more targeted, right? So as we look to our marketing dollars, we want to spend them effectively and efficiently with every time, as well as be able to get to, I think, probably what is every marketeer's dream of that one-on-one relationship marketing, right? So the better that I can understand and hone that messaging, the more relevant I'm going to hopefully get that kind of voice or share of the customer. And then ultimately, right, we're all in the business of making money, higher conversion rates and higher yield out of the activities that we do. So really understanding how people are behaving versus what they're saying, how they're actually interacting with you is kind of the very big brother, scary type of scenario that most people think about, kind of watching patterns and behaviors. It's more really how do you take that data and make it more intelligent so you're making better investments for higher yield. Not really to get the creepy factor out there, because I know once it gets too creepy, you get kind of pushed away from a vendor or supplier.
Get into data use issues.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to be too creepy as a marketeer, but you really want to understand what's resonating, what isn't, what channels are actually working and driving people kind of through the funnel with really the highest optimized yield.
And so Sashi, is it, are we largely talking, are there sort of both rear view mirror sort of things that we are doing in customer analytics, and are there also sort of more predictive, more prescriptive things we are doing?
Yeah, so what I would say is that customer analytics is one area which is definitely going to be the most promising area when it comes to BI, right? So whether it is big data or not big data, but the customer analytics is key because that's going to keep your company alive. So I divide customer into multiple segments, and broadly speaking, like enterprise segments, consumer segments, or SMB segments. So depending upon which segment you are targeting, you have a different need for customer analytics. So if you're in enterprise segments, your behavior, you will try to find out what type of purchase pattern they have done it, what's very likely to do a cross-sell, upsell type of behavior. When you are dealing with something on the consumer side, then you will go into more of a website behavior, what type of sentiment analysis they are doing it, what type of big data, and when it comes to like what type of social networking sentiments coming across your company, right? When it comes to SMBs, they have a different types of customer analytics. But combining all three, there is a certain pattern of analyzing the customer behavior. So that's more of a looking backward. What is the rear view? What Ravi said, the rear view. But what is also very important about going to the predictive analytics, like about more of a predictive and prescriptive analysis. So what they have bought, it's a history. It's not that they're going to buy the same product or they're going to buy the same migration product. You need to figure out what type of solution offering you can do that, what type of service offering you can do that. Many companies are now switching from a product-based company to a services-based company. Like this is a new trend where you can see that you can attach with a customer of different types of prediction of this, because this company has bought a unified communication or a certain particular router. It is very likely that a customer will buy this particular switches. So these type of, and not just predictive of what they will buy, also to prescribe like what time frame they are going to buy it. So it's more of a predictive and prescriptive analysis where a lot of big data players are coming into picture. And it's not just a traditional Hadoop type of thing. I'm talking about more of a data mining, Hadoop combined, because this whole big data is in a very early stage as of today. We all know that a couple of them we are lacking when it comes to use cases, but we all are making trying our best effort to make it as real as possible. But days are not far when you do this, all these data mining tools and these big data rules are going to be submerged, and they are going to have a perfect synergy of how to look at the historical purchase and how we can predict the future. I think customer analytics will be the pivotal role for this whole big data trend.
And so you mentioned sort of, if you see in e-commerce, for example, people are using a variety of different data streams to, like you mentioned, sort of recommend products, do lookalike analysis. Do you see similar things happening in other segments also?
Yes. So it all depends on like which segment you target, but every segment has a customer behavior, and every segment customer behavior is same. Like I would say similar, because in a consumer market, the customer affinity may be very fragile, because today you are with a particular iOS, tomorrow you can go to Android, which is the customer affinity is slightly more when it comes to the enterprise segment, but the pattern behavior of customer and how to analyze the customer data, it's going to be very, very consistent. Which segment you belong to, it doesn't matter, because analyzing customer behavior in a rear view lenses to look at the forward looking is going to be the key for your company to survive.
And who is the buyer in the case of customer analytics? What functions is it impacting?
Within a particular question.
In a company.
In a company, mostly the marketing function is the most, I would say, dominant player when it comes to behavior, analyzing customer data, because they are the most analytics provided to all the sales functions. They also recommend something to the product company about what type of product. Also, they do their own marketing for sure. Like every company, they have their own product team to analyze what product is coming and what type of behavior coming in. But mostly, I would say the marketing And within product marketing, they are the key of this whole customer analytics.
Any other thoughts on customer analytics? We can go to other use cases. Supply chain. Maybe Sendhil, do you want to talk about what's the use case in supply chain?
Maybe I can kind of broad base it a little bit. So the use cases, certainly supply chain visibility, right? Supply chain visibility has always been something that people wanted to conquer, but have been in various stages of maturity or have had various levels of success. So that is one big area, and the reason I think it has been somewhat of a mixed bag so far has been because if you look at companies that are supply chain intensive, right, the business processes that they have are fairly well entrenched. They're very well inured. The products, and typically these companies, what they do is they really bring together best of breed products, software products, right? They're able to perform those business processes. They're able to perform, but the information exchange is really lacking, right? So, and also it's a very tough and big problem to solve. So I think that is one big area where big data can help. The other area where I'm seeing more of a trend in high-tech companies is kind of extending your existing systems. Well, there are different connotations to this because one, you can augment your existing systems, BI or data warehouse systems. The other thing also that I'm seeing is they're replacing expensive data management systems with more cost-effective big data solutions. Right? The third one is cost optimization, right, within high-tech companies. What I mean by that is how do you optimize your procurement costs? How do you optimize your supplier base, right? What are the parameters that you need to take into account to do this optimization? Is it always the lowest cost, or is it something beyond that? How successfully has your supplier been able to fulfill your request, right? Things like that, a little more advanced than what you're typically used to. And how is big data helping in some of this? What you were able to do, I think supply chain visibility also, obviously there are a lot of companies that are in this space, they've been able to do this, but now they're able to do it quicker and they're able to bring in more data points, right, than before. Earlier, if you were doing it in a bunch of spreadsheets with people geographically distributed all over the world, you're able to do number crunching quickly, you're able to bring data at a rapid rate than before. So those are some of the areas that I think I'm seeing use cases. Although I would say the replacement of existing data management systems with more of a
We'll come to
cost-effective
that
data management.
in another section. We'll come to that.
That is the one.
Ram, do you want to pick a different business function use case?
So pardon me, I mean, you set the ground rules of not giving you a plug of products, but I have to talk about the products of what we sell within Aruba, give a use case scenario. So as I mentioned, I mean, we basically sell wireless access points and wireless mobility controllers. I mean, these are the controllers that manage the traffic of your Wi-Fi users within your network. And recently, I mean, a few months back, we acquired a company called Meridian, which is used for what we call as a wayfinding software. The use case that I can think of big data, not within Aruba, but for many of our customers, we use a segment called as PFE, or public-facing enterprise. These are typically the casinos or hospitals or retail stores or big malls where we deploy our honeycomb configuration of access points, and we collect a plethora of data when people with multiple devices. I mean, we find that an average number of devices that are held by any individual, for any matter, even this audience, is upwards of 3 to 5. When you have your laptop, you have probably, I mean, I saw Mike having 2 of his phones. So in situations like these, I mean, so one of the applications that we have, the software that we have with our acquisition of Meridian is, you're at a hospital, typically all of us have the scenario of getting lost. I mean, you have to go to the X-ray facility, or you have to go to the orthodontics. Where is it? I mean, you are lost. And this application basically provides the ability for directing you within, I mean, you call it a GPS within a building, rather than GPS on the road. I mean, this is GPS that is facilitated by the access points that you have within the building. Now, expand the scenario to a retail store. So, I mean, whether it is Macy's or whether it's Nordstrom. Now, suddenly they have the ability to look at the traffic of people who are crossing the aisles, be able to push content, be able to push coupons or discounts. As you're crossing the aisle with this red, beautiful sweater, oh, suddenly this message pops up saying that, hey, I see someone wearing red sweater. So here's a 30% discount. So suddenly, I mean, the ability for companies to make use of the traffic, the network traffic associated with the devices, they're not going to have the information of who you are for privacy reasons, but at least be able to collect this information of network traffic and be able to associate content and promotions associated with that and push it to the device at an appropriate time. We claim that we have got the ability to track your presence within an access point to the level of 1 meter or 2 meters. So think about it when you are crossing a particular area within Home Depot, searching for a certain product, your ability to find that exact product at that particular location. So I see the use case not necessarily within my company, but for customers of ours, mostly the public-facing enterprises who implement the solution of big data to be very beneficial.
Any other customer service, Michael? You see, like people are on the phone all the time, can they be more productive, more efficient?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, from a best practices perspective, you can understand what their issues are, how many open cases they have, how many, looking at their install base, as you're interacting with them direct on the phone, trying to solve their immediate needs, and actually it lends itself to other cross-sell or upsell opportunities while you have the person there, depending on what the person's role. Usually it's a technical decision maker in those cases. Then there's all the support kind of data, which is highly unstructured, which you can do text analytics on to help infer more of a near real-time than a real-time kind of use case. Probably the best is the real-time use case of, hey, we see you have 2 or 3 other cases open as you're mining kind of all the data associated with the individual while you have them on the phone. So how do you raise your awareness and level of customer service at the same time while you're, one, trying to get them back online and provide them services to keep them fully enabled, but it also gives you an opportunity to do a multitude of different things depending on kind of the level of severity, what type of issue it is, to bridge the gap, to do a warm transfer over to inside sales if the need, you know, if the case presents itself. So there's just a lot of data, particularly in the support arena, highly unstructured. How do you pull a normalized view of that and then infuse that with the rest of your customer data to better understand really the patterns and behaviors? And that's really kind of the theme, is pattern-based recognition to understand trends or nuances. And then how do you bring it back to being able to relate? Obviously, you want to take care of your customers' needs, but be more informed of the larger relationship that you're having with the customers.
I think, as you point out, the old way of doing things was try to get the customer off the phone as fast as possible. And now they look at that as a very valuable opportunity to do something else. Next best action.
Yeah, most call centers are basically rated on how quick they can bring case resolution, cases handled per day, case per operator, and as you look to go deeper from a customer relationship management perspective, you don't want to just look at break fix. What are the other opportunities that you have while you actually have the customer who potentially could be the business decision maker on a future product to try and help level your whole engagement with the customer.
Good. Let's maybe on the topic of use cases and in different business functions, maybe take a few questions if there are.
You mentioned, I think it was Mike that mentioned kind of the creepy factor. You know, I think being an enterprise customer or even just going to Amazon and having them recommend things that are relevant probably doesn't creep us out, but someone tracking me within a meter of walking around a retail store might feel kind of creepy. So I guess the question is there any discipline being applied to that kind of creepiness versus usefulness? You know, can that be codified, or is that just going to be, you know, I'll know it's creepy when I feel creeped out?
I think most marketeers would never want to hit that creepy factor with you just because it feels like your personal space has been violated. I think what we see is the fact that you want to anonymize that data and aggregate it and look for the patterns and trends. Now, obviously, some companies are pushing the envelope in different areas depending on what they're trying to do, particularly new upstart companies that don't have, they're kind of creating new spaces as they go and pushing new business models out. I think more as we look from a tech, enterprise, established, I mean, you go slow. You're not the rapid adopter of technologies. You kind of want to wait and see how the other companies, particularly the upstarts, push the envelope. And then once the technologies that support that and the business cases actually come to fruition, then you can adopt the best of what's out there and apply it to what are your main business goals you're trying to drive. I think a lot of companies, and particularly a lot of people I talk to, I mean, being in marketing, we talk about that whole creepiness factor. Yeah, you can do it, but would you ever want to? It really depends on the particular use case you're trying to solve for your customers, because really should be, what is the view of the customer in this experience? And if you ever get beyond that like creepy thing, like you know everything that you're doing, right? At that point, you probably don't want to deal with that company, right? You go find somebody else who can provide a like service, and you're probably going to go for something at a cheaper price point, right? It's really what is the value? Are we creeping you out or not? Because I would definitely err on the side of don't creep your customers out, right? Kind of the in-place advertising, direct targeting, and the geolocation tracking. There's definitely use cases for that you would find as a consumer very relevant and helpful, right? There's other cases that you're looking at that you would probably take a step back and say, hey, I don't want to deal with that. This section, this product or whatever, it's a commodity, I can swap it out tomorrow. So you really have to find that happy balance between, we're trying to understand this data and anonymize it to offer a better product or service versus pushing you back because today with the technology, you could track everything.
So I probably have to add on to that question because that referred to the example that I gave. So there are two types of data that gets collected here. I mean, you walk into any store that is Wi-Fi enabled. What is being recognized is by the sheer presence of you using the access points. The network recognizes that you are crossing that particular location. I mean, it doesn't recognize you as an individual. That is largely going to be dependent on the application pertaining to the retail store that you launch upon entering the store. I mean, you have seen that Home Depot suggests that you launch your Home Depot application or Macy's launch your Macy's application. At that point of time, you have already given the permission to that retailer. It's okay for you to recognize that I have entered your store. At that point of time, you have given the permission for the store to collect the information of the path that you took within the store and what aisles did you visit. So it's okay. I mean, you already granted the kind of freedom for the store to collect that information. But in the absence of you launching the retail store specific application, what is being tracked is the amount of traffic that crossed a particular location. So.
It's a good question because e-commerce and advertising rapidly moving towards marketing to an audience of one and using all kinds of data, behavior data, propensity data, demographic data, intent, interest, and even throwing in some serendipity because they want to try to discover new interests and not just what they already know.
My favorite example, though, is a major grocery store chain that actually tracked and looked at using the cameras in the store, right, the patterns and the behavior that shoppers do, where they basically, for the dads, a lot of dads going in the store, put the diapers at one end and the beer at the other to make sure that you can buy a lot of stuff going in between, right? So obviously the yield is, they're trying to sell you more products. But there's a lot of different applications. It really depends what you kind of open yourself up to.
For the people who don't know, do you want to tell them the correlation between why dads who buy diapers buy beer?
Well, so most of the time, the wives have obviously set them out to go get diapers, and they figure that if they put the diapers at the far end of the store, depending on the location when you enter in, more than likely you will pass the beer, and because you're stressed out, you're more on that. Grab the beer and then grab the diaper. So after you fill
it's a reward for the dad.
It's for the dad.
It's not for the baby. Okay, we'll take one more question.
There's a question from there.
Yes. Go ahead.
So, I heard you give some use cases about data in high tech. Can you also talk about metadata? It's been really in use, especially this moment.
Any thoughts on metadata as opposed to data?
Yeah, I don't know if the treatment has been any different yet. Okay. Metadata, you probably are aware of the different types of metadata, you know, operational, business-oriented, and all that technical metadata. But you know, when you congregate multiple sources of data, it becomes important in the sense that if people have to trust that insight that you provide, you know, then metadata becomes important, because at some point, you know, they want the lineage and they want to know what this field means or what this data means or where did it come from and things like that, right? So to that extent, I think metadata becomes important, maybe not necessarily upfront when you start the project, but you realize it as an afterthought. Or maybe you sprinkle some metadata in the beginning and then you kind of catch up towards the end. But I don't know if there have been any kind of strides in you know, making the metadata population maintenance and creation any easier than before. I haven't seen that. I mean, there are a lot of tools out there that help you kind of gather metadata. Some of them are extremely expensive. Okay, you know, very large companies kind of have tried it out and they've had different levels of success. But again, it depends on how alive you want to keep it. Right? It's not a once and done effort.
So I just want to add on top of that, right? I think the big data, the stage where we are in, I think it has not reached to a level where the maturity is there to define, the need of metadata has been defined yet. So because of the 3 V's, what the famous of velocity, variability, and volume, right? So when it comes to that, we are doing this pattern analysis, we are trying to find out the unknowns, what we know, and we are just trying to figure out what's there in this data. And then once we know all those type of things, then only the metadata thing come into picture. So right now the industry is seeing more towards finding this unknown, finding needle in a haystack of what is there in my customer log, what is there in my customer behavior. So those things, I think, once we maybe cross the chasm, we will see all those metadata coming into picture. I see the industry is little in the incubate stage when it's not needing as of today. But of course, it's going to come.
Let's maybe switch. Any more questions on the use cases?
Quick one I have. So in this driving these within your companies, you mentioned around customer analytics and marketing is, but generally speaking, where is the request/budget coming from within your companies to drive these projects?
So primarily marketing, sales. Sales definitely wants to be able to hone and get the sales force coming better, more targeted, trained, positioned well to sell. Support is another area that you really want to understand those patterns and behaviors, and how can you offer better support by understanding really what customers are doing. But I think the lion's share of the budget is really coming from marketing and or just IT supporting the various business functions.
But finance has its FP&A. They're kind of big users of data management,
Yep.
BI tools. You see a lot of use of it in finance.
Yeah, at least in Aruba, I mean, the driver for most of what I call analytics business intelligence needs sponsorship comes from 3 key organizations. Customer advocacy, driven by the need to reduce the cost of service. It's driven by, obviously, the sales organization. In our example, it's not directly the field sales, but the sales operations function. And the third pillar in our scenario is finance. These primarily are the 3 functions that I can think of. We don't have deep budget dollars like bigger companies for marketing to drive bulk of these programs, but it is driven by pure execution-driven needs coming from sales and customer advocacy and finance.
And the roles of the people, is it primarily ops that is?
That's an interesting question. I mean, when Ravi and we spoke earlier, I was defining the engagement that we typically do across different business functions. Like, if you look at the usage of business intelligence and reporting, I mean, I kind of segmented during my conversation with Ravi into, if you look at the sales organization, very rarely I have come across a sales organization of a user from the field craving for data. I mean, typically you would see that these are, I don't know how many of you from sales organization, I don't think that any of you, but these are cocky guys who think that I know my customer, I don't have a need for any of the reports or intelligence that you're going to provide me. So in the area of sales, I personally feel that it is the ops function, the sales operation, the back office functions, who are going to make use of intelligence and reporting in some manner to provide to the field users. When it comes to the customer advocacy function, the same thing holds true, because that's an organization where you have the technicians who are fielding the calls. How am I going to reduce my total cost of service is going to be essentially driven by the ops folks within CA. When it comes to finance, I have seen in my experience that it is the low-level functional data finance analysts who crave for business intelligence and insights. So I kind of segmented in my conversation that when I'm looking at finance, of course, in most of these implementations, you need to have the sponsorship and blessings coming from the VPs and SVPs of this organization. But you kind of have your engagement mostly at the analyst level when it comes to finance, with the mid-management level of the sales ops and customer advocacy ops. That's kind of my, what I call, ability to succeed as a IT person supporting them for information needs.
So generally ops, except in finance, you say there are actual analysts
Correct.
who are consuming this data.
Because I mean, if you look at, I mean, that kind of takes a segue into one of the philosophies of business intelligence that I believe that I feel that most of us are married to tools and applications that if you're in IT, you're wedded to a tool, and if you're having a IT leadership, they want to see the adoption of that tool that was implemented. I took what I call a pragmatic approach of, as long as the needs of the business, whether it is doing a data extract, you supply what I call tons of CSV files if they need. If your data warehouse is going to support that in providing the CSV files, if it is going to be multiple spreadsheets that you need to provide them for them to do that business, so be it. Because at the end of the day, the financial analysts, be it any company, they're not going to move away from your Excels, whether it is any kind of product. Again, I'm not going to use the names of the various BA applications that we see. How many of you who are IT practitioners or BA practitioners have seen anyone from finance embracing that, heck, this tool gives me everything that I need? They're going to use the tool to pull the data, load it into Excel, pivot it, analyze it to depth. So why not give them what they are looking for without fighting the battle? Suddenly you move them from being your adversaries to being your allies, and I mean, suddenly you become their business partners because they are fulfilling their needs. So that's why I say that these are the people who are deep in the trenches, analyzing the data, providing the financial statements and margins and discount analysis all to the top leadership. Enable them with whatever data needs that they have, irrespective of the data warehouse platform, irrespective of the BA application platform, irrespective of the middleware you might have. Give them the information.
Let's come back to this topic. So we'll hold some of these questions on the use case. We'll come back to the end because I want to move to, we have a bunch of topics. So let's just move to sort of analytics. And so I heard kind of a lot of talk about BI. And so if I were to characterize sort of analytics and a kind of a hierarchy, sort of you have dashboards, reports, BI, sort of what happened type of things. Then you have sort of why did it happen, data mining, statistical techniques, insights, anomalies, patterns, kind of why did it happen. Then you have sort of more predictive analytics driven by machine learning, kind of what is likely to happen.
Yep.
And perhaps after that is what would you like to happen, and driving kind of iterative optimization. So in high-tech industries, kind of where, in terms of a maturity curve, kind of where do you see people? Sendu, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think there are several maturity models, and I broadly tend to agree with what you said. I think depending on who you are at multiple stages, right? But by and large, I would say, well, if you're in a retail electronic consumer business, right? I think you're far ahead. But by and large, I think people have moved beyond the regular sense and respond kind of BI stack that's very traditional. Most of them are at the cusp of predictive, right? Simply because of competitive pressures, right? So just because somebody else that's a competitor is doing that, people have started looking at that. So I would actually also say, maybe the likes of Apple and those guys, they are far ahead in the curve if you simply look at the kind of emails that you get, right, in terms of promotions and things like that. I think they're far ahead. So you definitely have most of them well entrenched in the BI sense and respond kind of space. There are, depending on who you are, I think anticipate and shape kind of deal, they're at various stages.
So, Ravi, from my side, what I would say is that in a particular company, depending upon which function you talk to, or depending upon which person you talk to, you will get different maturity curve. So, BI maturity curve is, there are two types of maturity curves, I would say that. One is, if you're in a particular segment, yes, a company is going towards a particular trend, and you may be looking at only the historical data and not the predictive modeling. But within a particular company also, when you talk to the marketing folks, normally marketing, they are well ahead in this maturity model. When you talk to the sales folks, they are not. So because they are more in the selling part, they don't have time or they don't have interest to do all these predictive modeling and all those type of things. So within each function, you will see a different types of maturity model. And when we talk about different maturity model, maybe a different segment of dashboarding, which is now becoming very popular, and you guys all must have heard about self-service, because this is another area which is evolving. Get me something, and I would like to investigate myself, and I would like to do my own pattern analysis. I would like, provide me a framework, don't give me a solution. I will dig into that and I will find my own solution. But that's another latest trend, I would say, in the last year and a half, that has definitely picked up a big time, and folks are moving away from dashboarding and moving more towards the self-service too.
So do you think people in different business functions want to be sort of analysts and go navigate data and do iterative investigation and all of that?
In each function, yeah, it's a good question actually, because different function has got the ops, like we have finance ops, sales ops, marketing ops, services ops. So those ops folks, they definitely would like to do their own self-service, because they don't know what they don't know. That's the biggest problem, because they don't know what they want. And if you define the dashboarding mean, that means you're defining the boundary that you have to play a soccer game in this particular defined square feet of this range. So ops function, definitely they would like to investigate and find out what they don't know and what type of pattern is existing, because there is nothing called BRD nowadays. Those days are gone where you get 50 pages of business requirement document and all those FSD creation and all those days are gone, because BRD itself is what they're in my mind. I will go and investigate. So you will get a little bit of a pattern type of thing, and then you define the framework. So long story short, each function, certain segment of folks, if you are a CXO, if a VP and all, yes, you would like to have a dashboarding and scorecard. If you are more an analyst and ops, you would like to more of a self-serve tool. Both are coexisting. This self-service notion was not there earlier, but now it has evolved a lot that I just want to get it fast and give me a framework, I will navigate myself.
So now BI has been around for a long time, and we're still talking a lot about BI. So I heard one new capability, self-service. Why have we been doing BI for so long? How come those projects are not at the next level?
So first I'll start with a statement that dashboards are there. So what I mean by that is from the initial days of way back in 2002, 2003, when the concept of building business intelligence dashboards started, today they play nothing but the role of being the marketing vehicle for the consumer of the data to know that, hey, this data is available and there is an organization that has built this dashboard that I can reach out to them. The reason I say the dashboards are great, because if you ask yourself, in terms of many of you who are in IT or business who have been engaged in some programs of some kind having built dashboards, how many of them are refreshed with what I call dealing with current MBOs or the challenges that face the organization? Most of the time, what comes up with the bag of a fantastic dashboard with the bar charts and the pie charts very quickly becomes stale, because they're not going to give any of those insights, because at some point of time they move from being information providing dashboards to being teasers for someone asking for more information. That's when it quickly moves from the sense of concept still works, but the paradigm is towards providing the tools in the context of a dashboard that enables them to do a little more analysis from the structured dashboard that you have seen in the past to something which is a blend of what we call the ad hoc analysis. So most of these companies, again, not to mention names, have moved to the area of blending these dashboards with the ad hoc queries that typically are run in the past by those data jockeys or the IT folks. So it's moving to an area where you're expected to provide the tools which move them from the standard dashboards to something which is not complex of understanding the fields and understanding the columns that are there in the data set, having some kind of a nomenclature that they relate to. So that is the kind of a area that usage of BA is moving towards.
You brought up an issue which is, how do people want to consume analytics?
Right.
Take someone in sales or take someone in salespeople used to Salesforce, some other tool like that, finance people using finance applications. Do they want to consume analytics through those applications, which is what they're dealing with as a day-to-day in their job? Or do they want this yet another IT tool on the side, which is quote-unquote BI?
Yeah, that's the good question, and this was again touched by me. I mean, typically when you look at CRM implementations, they got a wealth of data within the context of CRM, but most of the CRM tools in the marketplace lack the ability to provide information or reports. Even if you go back to what I said, that's dead. The dashboards are kind of very primitive when it comes to the CRM tools. Obviously, the need is there for us to consume the data from the CRM system. We're not going to talk about data mart or data warehouse, which is the next topic. But independent of that, consuming the data in some capacity and providing the value add to that data set that typically originates from CRM and piping it back to the CRM. I mean, most of us would have come across the scenario of integrated dashboards that are going to be available within the transaction applications. So the path that I've seen would have a little bit of stickiness is in providing the same kind of an information rather than in a standalone application, but piping it into the application that they are forced to go to. I mean, I'm not a fan of CRM by myself because when I interacted with several of the salespeople, I mean, irrespective of the company size or the nature of the company or the business that you are in, a salesperson would always say that I am forced to put it because the management wants me to put in the opportunity that they have to roll up to get that visibility. So anyone in the sales organization is going to say that I don't like to put in the information in the CRM. So he's forced to go to the tool. As he's forced to go to the tool, there is a little bit of value add that you are providing within the tool in terms of the integration that you're able to draw outside of CRM in your data warehouse or data mart, but pipe it into an application that they are forced to go to. That's one way of looking at it. The other way you look at it is that in most of the organization, business functions are always going to be wedded to something that they are fond of. I mean, it could be a cube in the case of a finance user. I mean, most of the finance users, I said that they use Excel because Excel is very amenable to working with the cubes. So you would invariably have a cube implementation when it comes to the finance organization. You have to support that as an application platform within your company. We talked about dashboards, which is for your kind of lightweight user, which is your sales user. And then in between these comes the ops function that I talked about. So,
Mike, do you have something?
Yeah, I mean, I think part to echo kind of, to me, dashboards aren't interesting because it really is a snapshot in time, even if you get the data real time to enable your parts and your pie charts and bar graphs and everything to be in tune with real-time bookings or whatever. To me, the more interesting bit of it is the actual intelligence that you can get, and then how do you drive, kind of Ram's point, how do you drive that intelligence back into your business real time to actually catch a market inflection or a user's inflection point, drive an action. That's to me really more around business intelligence is interesting. Because just to do reporting for the sake of reporting, to build a dashboard to give you a one-time snapshot or even a real-time snapshot of your business, that's all looking backwards. The real driver is how do you make your business smarter? How do you make your customers more sticky with your products? Kind of the general theme around tech. And being here in the Valley and talking to a lot of folks in the Valley, I mean, there's kind of the bleeding edge and the cutting edge. And I think really the bleeding edge of it, and I still have yet to see it in any use cases, is really that kind of AI bit. So where you are doing that kind of machine language, predicting, and driving kind of the future. So there's obviously different levels, kind of around the theme of the different maturity levels for the businesses, for the use cases that they're trying to drive for intended predictable business outcomes.
Let's take a couple of questions on analytics.
Take your back.
Go ahead. Give me 1 second. He's bringing a mic.
Hopefully you can hear from back here, but basically I just question about all the subject area that you got covered, analytics, and earlier about later on data warehouse. But where's the pain point, like that you guys experienced so far? You know, using the tools and different subject areas. Is it okay to ask this question?
Yeah. So let's this is sort of along the lines of what you said, which is what's yeah. So the gentleman here is asking, kind of, we're talking about all these technologies and tools and approaches, but what's the pain point? And I'll extend this question to say, sort of, what's the business value it's delivering? What is the benefit to the business user?
I'm sorry, actually, one clarification on pain point. Actually, what is technology not doing today? Where is the area that you're spending a lot of time on that you get a little value? But
For that one, let's come back. But any thoughts on just business value thing?
Sure. So I would say that there are many pain points actually to begin with. The first and foremost is defining the requirement itself. Like, first of all, there are a lot of times what happens that we develop something, and when we develop, we realize at the end of the project, oh, you know what? This is not something what they asked for. It happens many times. The need, the perceived need, because it's not the defining, many times it is perceived need. And those things are not well defined and well communicated. So that's one area where we definitely see a lot of challenges. The second is, like, no tool as of today in the market is going to suffice your need. And that's where you struggle, that whether I want to do more in mobility, or I want to do more in location-based BI, or I want to do more in a browser, or whether I give more importance to performance, or I want to go for more of an operating expenses, because every product today will give you certain niche area, that this tool will give you the lowest OpEx, but what about the other thing? Maybe the development cost is very much. So finding the right balance of how you need to create your own scorecard of what is my success criteria for BI program, like how I am going to make that BI program successful, what are the different metrics, what are the different scorecards, and then only you can define the right tool. So I would say that first is the problem definition, the second is the tool selection, the third, and which is coming really popular in the last 1 or 2 years, is again persona based. There is a common need that, okay, I built a dashboard, go and use it. But that's not going to work, because what an executive look is very different from what an analyst will look for that, or what more of a sales engineer will look at. So how to create a persona injected in this whole BI framework is a key for adoption. Because if the tool is not adoption, your operating expenses is very high. And I go with a famous, like, it's not my line, but I'm just going to use it, because if someone is not using your application, that means the cost is infinite, right? Even though whatever is the cost, you just divide by 0, it becomes your infinite cost. So there are a lot of times what happens in BI that you develop and you'll find almost zero adoption. So that's where the adoption, persona, defining the right need, proper tool selection, performance, because this is another, in 2009-10, if you're getting something in like 14-15 seconds, it's considered to be a good thing. Come 11-12, I don't want to wait for like more than 5 or 6 seconds. It becomes standard. 2013, if you're developing a mobile application, you want something in less than 2 seconds, 1 second. In fact, I click something, it should rotate. So they're doing a lot of things on the performance enhancement also, right? So many areas of pain points, and how to fit that, whatever, and on top of that, you'll get a limited budget, believe it or not. You are not going to get $1 million for defining a BI program, so you will get X amount of dollar, and you have 15 metrics, and you are not going to get 5 out of 15, period. So how to pick your best 5 and then you can sell the product is a real challenge.
I want to take a slightly different perspective. All those challenges exist, but I think if you kind of click a few levels above, if you take a normal, regular application, right, it's all wrapped around certain business processes, whether that's finance or sales or marketing. But in the analytics space, the fundamental thing that I think if you recognize it, to a large extent it can mitigate some of the pain points. And the reason this becomes a little painful or challenging or interesting or however you want to define it or call it, is that the way humans think is the way analytics run, right? The way, and I think he was referring to BRDs and things like that, and we were also talking about self-service, right? The reason people are asking for, well, give me the data set and I'll figure out, just go away, leave me alone, right? Is because no matter, even if they give you a requirement today, and that's something that we've kind of struggled through the years, they give you a requirement 2 weeks ago, and in 2 weeks' time, the way they think changes, right? So the rapidness with which a business in general, all over the world, is changing is very high compared to what it was about 5 years ago or 6 years ago, right? So it's really hard to pin what those requirements are. So I think in general, if practitioners recognize that there ain't no such thing as a BRD in this space, because what they tell you today is different from what they want tomorrow, right? So self-service, I think recognizing the trifecta, and the trifecta is self-service is one, the other one is the standalone BI, and the third one I think probably you're referring to kind of operational BI or embedded BI or something like that, right? They all have their purpose, right? They all have their space in the ecosystem. Where does operational BI fit? If you really want in context, if somebody is working with an application and they want to know what is happening right now, right? They don't have to log out of the system, go into a system that looks different. It kind of helps you be that pervasive BI. It helps you kind of adoption and all that. Where does your standalone BI help, right? It is when you really want to marry that data with trend and history and things like that. Where does self-service help is when people want to do their train of thought analysis, the way they think today and the way they want to explore data today or information today is very different from the way they want to explore data tomorrow. So I think it's really a trifecta, and they all have their use cases, and we just have to recognize that they have their own use cases and not try to force fit them, and I think that will alleviate some part of the pain.
So one
quick,
quick
short one.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the biggest challenge, because the vendors out there now in the BI space are advancing their stacks quicker than some of the traditional software players. So there's more innovation, I think, happening in this space than many others. So to me, it's not really the tool, it's the foundation, which is data quality. So every time you bring in a new data set, you want to look at something else, you're faced with data quality challenges, then you have to root cause it, fix it up at the source, reiterate kind of your look at the data, and just data and data quality issues, I think, are always going to be prevalent, and that's what I see as the biggest challenge.
We'll take one more question out there.
Yeah, hi. I'm wondering, when analyzing data, what's the most interesting or non-intuitive pattern or correlation you've seen or come across?
I don't do data analysis myself, but I can give you an example of something from my days at Cisco that was very often used. Here's an example of someone who was in our marketing organization doing statistical modeling on light tech companies to arrive at what we call as a propensity to buy score. And this is a famous case of when you look at the retail segment. I mean, Walmart is one of the major retailers, and this analysis of the buying patterns and other factors in terms of the number of locations, the number of employees, the number of data centers. When you take all of this together, I mean, which is one company that is very similar to Walmart. I mean, typically the ready-made ads that you think of is maybe Target. But this finding said that the company that is very similar to Walmart from the Cisco example was Citibank. I mean, this is something that straight away you cannot correlate, but just looking at the number of locations that Citibank has got its offices, number of employees of Citibank, and number of the kind of purchases purely from the networking sector perspective, it may not apply to other industries. The historical purchases that were made by Citibank compared to that of Walmart showed that Citibank and Walmart are like-sized companies. I mean, the next question is that, okay, this is great. What do I do with this? I mean, typically, I mean, in companies, you use this kind of information to address selling opportunity. So, for example, in this case of, again, Walmart and Citibank, you see an example of Walmart purchase cycle is every 5 years. I mean, they refresh their networking gear every 5 years. You see that, hey, in almost every trades, I see that Citibank is similar to Walmart, but what is their refresh cycle? I mean, is it 7 years? Is it 3 years? If it is 7 years, I definitely have an opportunity to have an advanced refresh in 5 years. If it is 3 years, probably I use that as a case study to go and push for Walmart to refresh their cycle. That is one example. When you expand this to, okay, now I look at Citibank, now I've moved from being in a retail segment to the financial vertical. Now I start expanding that Citibank to JP Morgan Chase or other vertical companies within that location and look at what are the similarities that are there within Citibank and these companies, say Wells Fargo or Bank of America, and where they are different. Now I crisscross this area of, in a simplistic example, just purely driven by these few factors of employee size, revenue, branch locations, number of ports, etc., etc. I move from Walmart to Citibank, I go from Citibank to Wells Fargo, I climb back up to, say Kaiser Permanente. So the possibilities of correlation is in abundance. Again, the challenge is always going to be that whether you have those statisticians, whether you have those modelers, you have those experts, data jockeys available in your organization who can draw these parallels. And even if you do that, having a sales organization, having a strategy associated with that, how am I going to tackle this? So great, I mean, if you find that refresh cycle of a certain company is so and so, how are you going to convince and what I call the collateral that you're going to come up with to take what is available as a data insight to a sales plan or a marketing plan of some kind that you're going to implement. The other example that I can extend to is typically most of the companies buy external data from research companies. They look at total addressable market, the kind of growth that you see in a certain segment in certain countries. Now, when you look at a car associated with a certain line of business that is growing at a certain percentage, that is a macroeconomic indicator that is driven by GDP and other macro indicators coming from the economists. How do you take that information and apply it to what is required by your business? We again, using my Cisco days, this was applied to a large extent. This was a consistent data that was collated starting at a macro level. You apply that to a minute level that drives your technology segment to the level of a particular product. Suddenly you have this information that propagates to engineering for the kind of technology that they need to focus on, propagates to marketing for the kind of marketing strategy they need to apply for certain geographies, goes to the sales side for the kind of territory planning that they need to make. So again, to your question, you start with a macroeconomic indicator of what is the GDP growth of Ethiopia or Yemen or Saudi Arabia. You distill it, you look at what you have sold in that country, extrapolate to the kind of share that you have for that product. If that company or the country is growing at 3%, the network spend is 10% of the 3%, that translates to so many dollars. I apply that to my wireless or routing or switching of those technologies. Now suddenly I have an ability to expand this information to a different functional organization.
Let's take one more, Ellen, there's some there, yes.
We're talking about self-service and that's an application, but are there BI application with access control and self-service? Say they're typically say in financial industry or healthcare industry. You want to give somebody self-service, but you don't want every user to be able to see every data. So how do you put access control? Are the use case for access control within a single big BI application?
So that's a very, I would say, common need for any self-serve, because whenever we define the self-service, access control is a basis of that, because we don't give the whole data warehouse access to everyone. Just go and play around with the data warehouse. The moment you plug into that particular system, your identity and access will be stamped, and you will see your data set. What is self-serve here is that you are not given the data pattern analysis. Within the data pattern which you have access to, you can go and play around with the data. You can find out what pattern is there, what type of modeling you can do, what type of visualization you can do. Those are self-serve, but self-serve is nowhere related to violation of data access and policy management. It is if someone is doing basically he is not doing the right thing, so self-service is always existing in conjunction with access management.
Thank you. We got to move on. So let's jump into data management. So central, let's get into sort of data marts, data warehouses, sort of business function oriented sort of small data repositories versus sort of centralized repositories. Give us a little bit of your thoughts on advantages, disadvantages of different approaches.
Right. You know, this is, to put it mildly, right, the centralized versus decentralized, it's been an eternal dialogue, right? I mean, quote unquote, I think argument or struggle, and there is no right answer. There is, in this battle, I think there is always truth, but there's no eternal peace. Maybe a different way of looking at it is, you know, centralized versus decentralized data mart, data warehouses. Where does the decision making happen? Where does it need to happen? In some cases, it's a combination of having to happen in the centralized location. In a lot of cases, I think with a global economy, you want to push that out to the edges, right? So if you take that as a framework, then most likely you will hit the right mix. I don't think there is one right answer. You know, it really depends on many factors like your localization, regionalization. Although intuitively it seems to be more, you know, economies of scale, and from a management perspective, data management perspective, bring all the data into one central location, right? Now, with the advent of big data, let's try to inject big data here. You know, with some minimal kind of governance, right? You still need to have your access controls and things like that. You still want to put that in place, but at times of crisis, right? If you're a large electronics company and you know your shipments didn't go through, or you know what have you, you have Thanksgiving and Christmas coming up. In times of crisis, you do want to have access to all of the data because you want to find out where things have gone wrong. You know what happened to your first pass yield. You know what happened to your quality. What happened to a certain raw material that needed to come in. You know, is there a problem with that caused some quality issues? So with big data, I think the capability and the repository is available for you to bring things into one central location for some specific purposes. But again, that will be an extension of this constant battle of, well, what do we do central versus what do we do out at the edges?
So let me, since you throw in the big data, so there are repositories like HDFS, Hadoop, and NoSQL and all of that. So is there a play, maybe Michael, you could answer this, is there a play of sort of the system of record type of data and kind of the kind of analytics, the scratch and play type of repositories? You see sort of an opportunity for multiple repositories for different purposes, much like OLTP and decision support?
Yeah, I definitely think that there's kind of room in the sandbox for all kinds of different environments based on the intended purpose. So we've been doing a lot with particular sandbox prototype environments, trying to bring some of the big unstructured data, bring normalized views to be able to join it up to the structured data, to be able to make sense of the patterns with the things like you know, bookings and revenue and those type of things to make those correlations. There's obviously, you're going to look at kind of your technology stack and try and apply the most relevant bits to the most relevant use cases to get the highest maximized yield out of it. So I think a lot of the companies, I think, are coming up with kind of a multi-tiered approach to different sets of storage, different commoditized ways to store different levels of data, and then offload it for archiving and easy retrieval. So a lot of it really depends on the theories that you're trying to prove out and what data do you need. I know that a lot of times, a lot of companies, and everybody's got a database under a desk or something like that, and people want that data to be able to do their own thing with it, and then a lot of times that data ends up costing you in those little servers under people's desks just because of either a pure risk factor or maintenance and other things, because now you've got business analysts that now become real IT people because they're maintaining their environment underneath the desk. That cost over time actually outweighs your kind of centralized storage and what you get from a highly available, highly centralized environment. You do need to find that balance of both, because innovate, but you're not going to do everything in your data warehouse, right? So you really depends on the needs or breadth and depth of the skills around analytics. You're probably going to find some type of hybrid approach to kind of balance the highly scientific, let's go do some exploring between the highly structured, secure, locked down data that you're going to report all your financials out of.
Any other thoughts on Hadoop and NoSQL? Like, what's the use cases?
Okay, so maybe not for Hadoop, but I'll connect to that part actually. But I just want to go back to the original question of data mart and data warehouse, and I'll come back to the Hadoop side. So it's an internal question which every company, almost every company has to go through. It starts with always a data mart, most likely because it's a startup mode. When you do a data mart, when you look at the different functions, the next evolution will come into, okay, how can I connect my marketing with the services data, services the supply chain data? Then you tend to think about, let's go to the data warehouse side. So from data mart, you go to data warehouse. And the moment you go to data warehouse, you will feel, oh, I'm connecting all my company data. It's so good. What happens in this process, most of the time, we create a monolithic application which sometimes doesn't move, and you become a standard. Oh, this is something, a big gigantic data warehouse, but getting one thing, I need to wait for 6 months. I still remember, like when I went to Oracle Open World last year, there was a booth, and somehow it's still like it. They said that, come to my booth, I will get rid of the whole ID function. Because that's like ID has been stamped typically in the data warehouse side, a system that doesn't move. So then from data mart to data warehouse, then it comes into, can we have a mini data mart into a data warehouse side? So it's a journey which we need to cover. And now coming back to the Hadoop side, right? So one of the trends which is coming in the high tech about how about establishing maybe Hadoop type of thing in a business loop and processing faster, which normally used to take like 6 months to process, or maybe bringing something in data warehouse taking like ages, maybe using this fast processing engine, and that gives the benefits of integrity of the data warehouse where I have a single source of truth, where I have a mirror image of the system of record, but I am also not getting stamped of monolithic slow application. So this way I'm seeing there is a synergy and evolution of injecting this data warehouse and Hadoop coexisting together and augmenting each other of how to process a faster set of records using these type of technologies, and then push it into this data warehouse and do all the reporting of this stuff. So that's a trend which I'm seeing definitely in this high-tech industry.
Sandil, any other use cases of those?
Yeah, well, I think in a nutshell, the NoSQL, I do see use cases, okay, and unlike what you would tend to think, or at least that's what I was thinking, that it kind of starts out from the IT organization. What I've seen is specific departments that want that agility and the variability, right? That NoSQL, depending on what flavor of NoSQL you're looking at, they want that, and they've kind of adopted that, and they're saying, and it's easy for them to adopt because it's really low scale, right? If you're talking about a couple of terabytes of data that they want to play with, and they want to have this variability, and scratch and dent that you talked about, it seems to be a relatively easy starter for them. And then it is kind of from there, it's kind of getting exported into the central organization, because it's also easy for the central organization to sell, because there are people out there in this enterprise using this, so it becomes easy for you to sell and adopt it. If you look at Hadoop, extreme volumes, cost pressures, right? So that's another area where I think Hadoop comes in. If you have extreme volumes, cost pressure, and predominantly kind of batch mode is where I'm seeing a lot of Hadoop being adopted.
Let's take some questions on data management. Angela here.
Yeah, I've got a question on company size. A friend from Aruba said that he didn't use big data in his company. Sorry. We heard from Aruba that he didn't use big data in his company, and my question's about company size. Is that really what's important? You could have an app vendor, for example, who is a one programmer person, but they have a very great app that's got a lot of big data, or a movie star, or maybe just one person, but they have a whole lot of data that's flying around from them. So how big does a high-tech company have to be? I mean, one thinks of people like Symantec and Flextronics and Cisco and big companies, but there are an awful lot of little companies here. And so if you were, say, selling a big data solution to someone, what would be the characteristics of a high-tech company? Would it be size, fame, number of users?
I actually think it would be the business cases and ferreting out the uses around velocity and volume and what are the real business problems you're trying to solve, and then what are those data sources that are
Such as?
It could be web traffic logs on a large sheer volume, depending on how many properties. That can generate all the click data, all the clickstream data. That could be terabytes of data that if you want to do pattern recognition on and derive insights on it. That's a very simple one, to a lot of application generated data which you want to capture, telemetry data. So it really depends on what the situation is, the technology, and what they're trying to achieve. And I think it kind of ranges from all sizes. So I guess in the case of Aruba, they may not be doing it, but I'm sure their customers are looking at the telemetry data they're getting in from location-based geo services and trying to make sense of it to do ad serving or other types of services you're going to offer on top of it. So I think it's more particularly when you're looking at open source, I can do it on a commoditized cheap environment. I could be a one-man shop doing it, or I could be a multi-billion, multinational corporations. It's all about the use cases.
I would resonate. I admitted that we don't have a use case for big data within the company. Primarily driven by the reason that if you take the example of web traffic, Mike talked about the capabilities that you're looking for using the data. In my case, I would say that using the traditional way of looking at your website metrics of your page views, visitors, users is good enough for me at this point of time. I don't need to do anything beyond this in terms of pattern recognition of click-through pattern that they saw by individual of the profile. I don't have a need at this point of time. We aspire to be a bigger company. Maybe a year from now, would I say the same? Maybe not. So it's all driven by the definition of the problem statement that we have at a given point of time. My problem statements are reducing the complexities for the business at this point of time, which are very simple challenges that I need to address. So as long as I address those simple challenges in a simplistic way, my constituents and my business functions are going to be happy, which may not be the scenario a year from now, 2 years from now. So to clarify on the size of the company again, in terms of what they sell in the marketplace. Netflix as a company, you see, they are a big proponents of big data because for the size of business, they are not as big as Cisco, but they have a need. So the size by itself doesn't define whether they use big data, they have a need for big data or not, but the lines of business where they are in probably will dictate that.
Thank you. Let's take 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up. Go ahead.
Do you see any non-textual data which is more common? Say, for example, now with Instagram coming up, you see a lot of images in it. Is there any other non-textual data which you can use it for data analysis?
Non-numerical, not
This
text.
is more of an emerging thing, which is, I think it's not still baked in because video analytics or graph analytics and all. It's more in a conceptual stage, maybe more like right now in the university space, but not. I have not seen coming to the real world, at least in the high-tech industry, I would say. Definitely somewhere in the media now that maybe going in, but in the high-tech industry, not to my knowledge. It's going to come, but not yet.
Another question? Go ahead, gentlemen.
What direction can you give us as people involved in startups and big data? What should we be focusing on? Do you have a particular sweet spot we should focus on?
If your market is high-tech industry.
Well, I would definitely say focus on the highest yield use cases, right? What are the biggest drivers that are going to grow your business, and what value, you perceived or not, right? It's a lot of, if you're looking at it from kind of like a data science perspective, you're really trying to find the next big thing within your data set that's going to enable something. So what is that that's going to enable growth, revenue, whatever you're looking for? And a lot of it, particularly in this space, is a lot of trial and error, right? So there is I have yet to see any one silver bullet around one use case that enables everything. So a lot of it is that just pure rational experimentation. But obviously, I would recommend going for something that's going to probably drive revenue and get you from 2 to 4 to 10 employees, right?
I have a little bit of a philosophical answer. I look at life a little simplistically, and I always have the philosophy that business problems are not really, really complex. I mean, if most of us who are in the data space, when you look at it from the data perspective, the business challenges are not really, really complex. They are simple enough challenges as long as you have the ability to break those so-called complex problems into simpler chunks. I mean, if you interact with any of the functional leaders, whether it is finance or sales or marketing or supply chain, they're always going to be challenged with 1, 2, 3 key problems, and they're always going to be driven by a few data points which are going to contribute. Most of the time in the IT world of BI implementations, or in the business world who are working with IT in the BI implementations, somewhere the problem statement is lost and these implementations become huge where the complexity becomes enormous. As BI practitioners, I would say that keep it simple, keep it manageable, manage it in chunks. I always, most of us, we are peers from a different company experience. We always believe that when you're looking at building capabilities for business, look at the shortest time frame. Typically, whether it is a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, keep the business engaged by breaking the big complex problem into smaller chunks and give them something to chew on every month, every 2 weeks, every fortnight. That way, you're addressing the problem a little differently rather than running a multi-quarter, multi-billion-dollar implementation, multi-billion-dollar implementation over several months. So that, I would say, would be my philosophical approach.
Adopt more agile approaches.
Well, I don't want to bring the concept of agile Scrum and all that. Again, driven by simplicity, make it simple. Small
waterfalls?
Don't go there on PLC, SDLC. I mean, again, to expand on that, I also strongly believe that many times, if you look at BA implementations, before you realize if you're a functional business leader or an IT person, most of us, we have committed the crime of expanding our team size to some number that is insane. I have seen that data problems, if you have small core teams of 3, 4, 5 people, they are, in most of the scenarios, addressable by these core teams. I mean, you have seen articles of modular teams. I believe in the concept of having as small a team as possible. They are going to be the most productive. Addressing small challenges over a shortest period of time, you live a stress-free life as a professional in the BA space.
One last question. Okay, maybe I'll ask the question. So just to follow up on what you said. So would you characterize sort of this, a lot of BI implementations along the way you said, big multi-million-dollar projects, tool-driven, single vendor tool-driven, big kind of turf for the who are the VP of analytics or whatever they're called, and sort of produce results 4 or 5 years later, which has missed the mark because the business has moved on. Is that a common situation?
I definitely would say that that's, I mean, if you take a census in this room, most of them would agree that what we started off, what we thought was simple, slam dunk, successful implementation has dragged on for multiple quarters or in some cases multiple years. I believe that most of the time when you look at a BA project or a program that comes into existence, it's always going to be a leader of an IT organization selling that concept to the leader of the business organization or vice versa. At some point of time in the life cycle of the BA project, those leaders who came up with that excitement of getting something done are out of the picture, that these programs are kind of limping along. So I strongly feel that that momentum, what is there in month 1 or year 1 coming from the so-called VPs, SVPs, or CEOs, or CFOs, or any of the C leaders, has to continue for several years. And if that fails to be there, you could as well assume that the program that you're running is not going to reach the intended audience. That is driven by the reason that most of us feel the challenge of change management. I mean, we use a terminology. I mean, I've implemented this application. Change management is extremely difficult. I'm a little conservative that I believe in the command and control, a stick-driven approach. Whereas if the leader of the organization, whether it's the CFO or the finance or the CEO of the organization or the chief of sales, if he's going to be convinced and if he's going to be consistent in his messaging across his organization, the BA programs can succeed. If it is not the case, for any one of us to deal with the mid-management on an ongoing basis, day after day, you're not going to hit the mark, you're not going to have it succeed, because this calls for the stick approach in the beginning that kind of establishes certain behavior at the mid-management at the lower level over time, and then that sticks. So that's my philosophy of how BA
So
should
we'll
be.
go with the stick approach and command and control. Just closing thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think it depends within the space, right? It depends on the type of initiative. If you're really looking at replacing your legacy systems with something better, newer, and all that, those tend to run for a longer period of time, okay? And really politically, business-wise, and otherwise, it's generally accepted because you have something that is running today and you're trying to forklift that, or you do something with a better system. On the other side, if you're looking at standing up some new business analytics capability, I don't think there is a whole lot of patience these days. I don't think anybody wants to wait for multi-quarter kind of deal, right? People want something in less than a quarter, right? In general, I think practitioners, the business that expects a lot from us and all that, in general, I think over the years we've gotten better at breaking down the overall goal into smaller goals and deliver something in every 3 months or what have you. So it really depends on what you're trying to do. If it is something that is legacy replacement and migration, you have kind of a longer leash. But if you have to stand up something that is really new capability, I quite frankly don't think you have that kind of luxury. You have to develop something quick and dirty, whether that is self-service if you're sending out some extracts or what have you. But you have to do something very quickly.
Sashi, closing thoughts?
No, I think folks have already said that, because this is well captured by the other folks here.
So I'm definitely going to echo what folks up here said. I mean, obviously, you kind of want to hit it hard and fast. You want to be reiterative in your approach, and you want to show continual improvement, right? And you want to be consistently and constantly looking for that not only perceived business value, but constant business value and uptake of kind of the outputs of your efforts. So obviously the executive support, having that on an ongoing basis, a lot of awareness too as well is definitely key. And then when you get those successes, make sure you hang those up super high, because that will continue to get your next round of funding, your additional resources to go do the next science project, right, and understand what you can do with your data. So hit it hard, hit it fast, and be consistent.
Well, I'll have closing thoughts. One comment on Ram's thing, which is it's great to have a leader who's a big advocate of data approaches. What's even better is if they build a culture, a data-driven culture in the organization, which kind of outlasts them. And so a great example is a company like Google, where I would say much of mid-level, low-level decision-making is data-driven. Then to Angela's thing, if you are carrying an iPhone, you are generating big data. So I think every business is going to have those use cases. I deeply appreciate all of you being here, our panelists from Cisco, from Flextronics, from Aruba, from Symantec, for sharing their insights, their experience, and please join me in thanking them for a great week.
We got some drinks left. We need to clear out around 9 o'clock or so we got 15, 20 minutes so we can socialize, network, chat some. And if anyone is interested in seeing the Dell gear, you can find me or Steve here in front, and we'll be happy to show you some of the stuff we have.